Welcome to this edition of About Lee. I sat down and spoke to Booker T. Mattison, author, filmmaker, who produced the short film Habeas Corpus, Lee Chamberlain's last film. Ladies and gentlemen, today I am very, very excited to have Booker T. Mattison on as a very special guest in this series that I've created called About Lee, which is about Lee Chamberlain and her professional and sometimes overlapping personal interactions with playwrights and filmmakers and sometimes people that just watched her and grew up with her, for example, on the Electric Company. But Booker T. Mattison created a wonderful short film called Habeas Corpus. A very impressive cast, and it was the last film that Lee Chamberlain ever did. If the film was completed in 2013, and then it went on to be shown and win a lot of awards at various festivals, one of them being in La Jolla, California. How is it that you became aware of Lee Chamberlain in the first place?
Sure. Well, when you summarize at the beginning the type of guests that will be on your show, I would fall into all of those categories because I grew up watching her on Electric Company. I mean, what wasn't she in? What's Happening, Different Strokes, you name it. She was in so many things, and she was one of those faces that you just saw and knew because she was in everything. And, ironically, that ties into how I thought about her for the film, because at the time I was a professor at Regent University, and I was preparing to do the film Habeas Corpus. I had written the script, and I believe, Chad Coleman and I had become friends because we were in another film years earlier. So he and I kind of developed the script together. And then I was trying to figure out, well, who do I want to pair with Chad in the film? And I don't remember if it was before or after I'd already reached out to Tim Reed, but there was a Black History Month screening series at Regent, and they showed Uptown Saturday Night. And when I saw her, I just remembered, I'm just like, wow, I always thought that she was just so incredibly beautiful. So I said, let me see if I can find her. And you were, of course, as you know, instrumental in me being able to locate her because I could not find Lee. But then you and I was able to find you, and then we exchanged some emails. You put me in contact with her and that kind of a thing. So, it was an honor for me to be able to work with her. Because again, all my life was like, wow, I just thought she was just so beautiful. And, when you're a kid and you're watching TV, you don't really think talent, it's like, but, it is talent, but it seems like real life. So you're not thinking, oh, wow, they're so talented because it's real life on the screen. So, it's been said, and I'm sure you've heard this, that if you cast well as a director, 85% of your job is done. So with Habeas Corpus, I just had to get out of the way. I had to come up with a shot list and get out of the way and just allow, seeing Tim and Lee and Chad go at it together, the family was incredible. And because we didn't have opportunity to rehearse because of everyone's schedule, we got together and had dinner. It may have been the night before we shot, because I think they all flew in the day before. So, during that dinner, it was an opportunity for me to meet and to discuss their family dynamic, as it were. And one of the things that I recall is that I had already come up with a bio for all of the characters and how they, came together and grew up as a family. But the three of them, when they started talking, it formulated a completely different history to these characters that made them at once far more rich and organic, and it also formed a bond between the three of them that I think is reflected on the screen in the performances.
What was the difference between what you had come up with and what they ended up forming organically?
Sure. In my mind, they, the character that Chad Coleman plays, their son, he had grown up in a religious household, and then he pulled away once he, started getting older, and he got into some trouble, which is, I keep that kind of hidden in the film what he actually did. But the way that they came up with it, and it was Lee and Tim because they're the parents. The way they came up with it, it was more like, okay, you can explore and figure these things out for yourself rather than coming from a religious background. So that completely transformed the trajectory of all three of those characters and how they arrived at where they are whenever the movie begins. So, and I use that as an example with my students because I teach directing and screenwriting, how the characters know the characters in your story far better than you do, even when you wrote it. So, I wrote it and directed it, but they knew the characters far better than I did. And I also try to tell them that, whenever you're working with characters, whenever you're writing or directing, these are real people that you're dealing with. And I use that as an example, saying, no one can tell me how to be Booker. Can someone teach me something? Sure. Can someone influence me? Absolutely. But no one can tell me how to be Booker. So if I'm dealing with real people whenever I'm writing and directing, and specifically in this case, with Lee and with Tim and how they raised their child, who am I to say what the home life was like? Who am I to say how they raised their child? They came up with that reality. So as the writer and the director, I had to embrace that because oftentimes, creators, they feel as if, well, I know these characters better than the actors do. So, and then that impacts how they direct. So it really limits and restricts what the actor gives you because you're coming in with all of these constraints of who they are, what they think, and how they should function.
Mm. Do you have a background in the theater?
I do not, but I will say this, because Lee and I also, we both are NYU alum. So I went to the graduate film school. And when I got there, they required us to take acting class, and I was livid because I'm saying to myself, because I was a mass communications major in undergrad, I thought I wanted to be a reporter and then eventually move up to be an anchor. So the fact that they required us to take acting class really, really disturbed me because I'm like, hey, I'm coming here to make movies. I don't want to take acting. But of course, it was the best decision. Well, I didn't have any choice. The curriculum was set. But I'm so glad that they required us to take acting because that allowed me to experience what it's like to have to do and become and to inhabit my emotions and use those to create a reality on the screen. So although I don't have a background in the theater, those 3 years of taking acting classes when I was in film school, those were seminal in how I write and how I direct. And I even use that now. I teach a directing class at UGA, and it's a 16-week semester. So the first 8 weeks of the semester, we don't deal with any of the technical concerns of directing. In most directing classes, they're talking about camera and angles and camera movement and color psychology and all these things. The first half of the class, I'm dealing with the students directing each other. I'm dealing with how you communicate with actors, how you get performances, because that's the part of directing that most directors, unfortunately, they never deal with and they're often most uncomfortable with. They're very comfortable with cameras and technical concerns, but when it comes to dealing with actors, they're very uncomfortable. So that experience has also shaped how I teach directing as well.
Yeah, well, obviously, or maybe not so obviously, the reason why I asked that question is just because you had that openness to allowing the characters to evolve even in a very short span of time. So that's very much like the theater. And of course, that was Lee's foundation and background, aside from, a little dancing and a little singing,
Right.
Was in the theater. So good for you.
The fact
Sorry.
that he was able to sing, do Broadway, do television, do films, activism, is pretty amazing. And, nowadays you don't often get these total talents where, they can function as a singer. They can function on the stage. They can function in television. They can function in film. And if I were to be a performer, which I'm not, that would be the type of performer that I would want to be. Where I can sing, where I can do theater, where I can do commercial work, where I can be on film and television. So it's pretty impressive.
Booker wanted to know what it was like having a mother in the arts.
I wonder what was it like, and I know I'm not here to ask questions, but I'm just curious, what was it like
Question.
to grow up, under the tutelage and being raised by a person with that diverse artistic skill set? Because I watched one of your music videos and I thought it was
Oh,
cool.
thanks.
How did she influence you? And was there a time where you resisted the arts because that's what she did?
It was great having her as a mother. She loved the arts. She loved all the arts. She loved painting. She loved singing. She obviously loved the craft of acting. And growing up in New York City in the 70s, I mean, I was born in 1963. So I began accompanying her to theater at a very young age. The first play that I remember her being in, well, that she took me to was Slave Ship, which was written by Amiri Baraka,
Well, Leroy
otherwise
Jones at that time, right?
otherwise known as Leroy Jones.
Wow, so she took you to that. That's incredible.
Well, I guess maybe she couldn't get a babysitter that day. I don't know. My parents treated my brother and I like we were intelligent. They tried to explain things, of course, to us, to our age, but they also had a lot of faith that, we were given brains and that they were to be put to good use.
Mm-hmm.
So for whatever reason that day, I found myself sitting in the features at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. So it must have been about 1969, which is very different than, it's kind of different than what it looks like now,
Right.
And the ship was a kind of a boat-like stage, double platform in the middle of the theater. It wasn't exactly a theater in the round. It was more like a theater in a hexagon or something. And then there was another part of the stage that was functioned as a flash, well, not a flashback, more like a flash forward.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, for the audience, it's all a flashback because, of course, we're watching part of the middle passage. But at any rate, there was a stage over there where there was a couple in a rocking chair, sitting on their porch in a rocking chair, two elderly Black people. And I just absorbed this rehearsal because I believe it was a rehearsal that I was at. I don't remember being in there wasn't anyone else in the theater except for me. And she placed me in a place where she could still keep an eye on me. And I just, kids are sponges. So I just, absorbed what was going on. And I remember at first being puzzled about the stage that was over there, but then, and it would be lit and then it would go into blackout and lit and go into blackout, to convey, this time and this sense of storytelling. And then I remember thinking, this is a very clear memory of mine, when I started analyzing the lighting and the use of lighting and understanding, why things were unfolding in which they were. And then also just kind of looking at my mother's character and thinking, wow, she's very upset, Of course, I knew it wasn't her. I knew that she was acting.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, for me, a great experience. And that started getting me thinking about, the mechanisms of creating stories and creating illusions for an audience at a young age. And then I went to other rehearsals. Like I went to the rehearsal that she did for, and actually helped her rehearse at home
Mm.
for Shakespeare in the Park.
Oh, wow.
She played Cordelia,
Mm-hmm.
which of course, she had to die and be dead on stage for about, I think, 20 minutes or so, 15 to 20 minutes, while James Earl Jones, beat his chest, in regret. And so she had me say, see if you can tell me if you can see me breathing, because
Mm.
I'm supposed to be dead for 15 minutes. So she laid on the living room floor in the frock that she was going to be wearing. And I, looked, and, there was just quiet. We went through the whole 15 minutes, and I said, no, I don't see you breathing. You seem dead. Yeah, good job. Or, even going to that rehearsal, or, it afforded me a wonderful life, because I was able often to go backstage and actually meet, the actors that she was performing with, or the different people that sometimes would come to the house. Like I remember when Raul Julia came to our home on 86th Street. He had just returned from India. He was going through a spiritual transformation. So my mother would allow me to be with the adults and to be with the artists, on the condition that, of course, there was no questioning that I would, but be well behaved, to be silent, just to listen and learn and to observe, and not to interfere. I think she really wanted that for me. She was always pushing me forward in that way, to learn how to speak to people in the artistic community. I think she felt that was very important. One more vivid memory is that we used to go to the ballet, because we lived more or less around the corner from Lincoln Center. So, of course, at that time, there was George Balanchine, that was the director of the American Ballet Theater, or am I mixing it up with the New York City Ballet? And there was Jacques d'Amboise, and then there was George Balanchine. But at any rate, so during intermission, the intermission took place in this magnificent marble, you know, how can you even describe it? Like hall with a massive staircase going up, and just this huge ceiling, and everything was white, and the bar where people would go to get their refreshments was white veined marble, and it was just very grand, and the light streaming through. And there was a gentleman with a white beard, kind of looked like Santa Claus way. And my mother said to me, she kind of knelt down and she said, Erica, do you know who that gentleman is over there? No, and, she said, that book that you have at home called The Fatal Lozenge by Edward Gorey, yeah, which was one of my favorite books.
Wow.
And he said, that's Mr. Gorey. I want you to go over there to him and introduce yourself and tell him how much you like his book.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, so I was like the duckling, and she was like the mother duckling, pushing me into the water. And so I did, she didn't come with me. She made me go, but she had that